good evening, and welcome to another episode of Thought That Get Results. I'm Everett Weber Herbert, and as per usual, we are here every Tuesday evening with something that at least we think is of community interest and or of some concern. And if you think that you have something which fits into that category, you'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program, well, why don't you drop us a line? Address it to the Let's Talk program in care of Vaughan Radio, P.O. Box 195, Charlestown in Nevis, or give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. And by the way, those will be the numbers you'll use to be a part of this evening's discussion. Again, thank you all very much for joining us. This is your voice in the community, Thought That Get Results. With regard to your participation in the show, we encourage you to call in on the numbers listed, 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You got a question or comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that when you're getting on the show, you're well organized and you take as little time as possible, but so we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem not within our broadcast standards, and we ask you always to be, however, be forceful with your points. Also, you can follow us live on our Facebook page and also on YouTube. You go to the YouTube, you click on to subscribe, and there we are live on YouTube. Follow us there as well for the live video stream. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community, Thought That Gets Results. Tonight, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, good evening.
To the entire listening and viewing audiences. However, allow me as usual just to extend some greetings to my husband there. It's going on to morning for him. Good morning. To my friends in St. Thomas, USVI, and to all the people of Nevis and St. Kitts scattered throughout the globe. Wherever you are, I'll bid you good night or good morning, whatever your location time might be. And I would just like to extend a warm welcome back to my colleague here, Mr. Hobson. And he was under the weather last week, and I'm hoping that he's feeling much better this evening. Well, he's here tonight, so welcome back, Mr. Hobson. Thank you, Webo, for the invitation to join you tonight.
Ted Hobson, it's good to have you back. Good evening.
Good evening, Webo. And first of all, I want to convey the minister's regret that he can't be here tonight, matters of state. However, he was able to bring me. I suppose at some stage he will get me back home. Webo, you know, I was down with the flu, and of course it's pretty horrid experience having that flu. You have everything. And, well, it seems as though I've overcome. So I'm here tonight, and I'm willing to discuss whatever comes on the table. Webo, good evening to all the people who have been listening over the years and still continue to listen. Good night to everyone.
Conrad Nile-Libert, good evening.
Good evening, Webo, and good evening to your staff here at Vaughan Radio, to my colleague around the table. Pleasant good evening, and to everyone in tune to this program today. This evening, Webo, today was a lovely day here in Nevis, I suppose, full of brilliant sunshine. It's not too early to welcome people home for this year's festive occasion. It's a big leap, yes, over the St. Kitts Musical Festival and other things, but of course, when I feel this way, I like to invite people to my island, especially people who, you know, have some concerns of Nevis, Nevisians scattered throughout the globe. Yes, I welcome you home this year for a festive occasion. Webo, nothing really dangling on my lips in particular. So, you know, I am prepared to be a part of whatever you put on the table or whatever my colleagues have to discuss. I'll be up to it, Webo, and I look forward to a good discussion tonight.
Okay. I got a couple of things that I'd like to mention, maybe spend a few minutes on each one. You know, I find that a number of things are pretty interesting. I don't know how many of you have been following, and you know, just before I got in, I was looking at the news, and this big, you know, scandal that has been unfolded in the United States, where a lot of movie stars and people of very influential positions it have been revealed how they have been rigging the system in some of the most prestigious universities and colleges to get people in by paying bribes and so on. You know, colleges, universities such as Harvard and Yale and, you know, those prestigious colleges. So it's something that is exploding. And I was looking at a discussion, and some of the commentators are now expanding it, not to just limiting it, sorry, not to just the universities, but they're now going into the basketball teams, you know, some in the colleges. They're going into even voting, and probably can link that as well, because I think about a week or two ago, they have decided they'll have to do a rerun in North Carolina, because, you know, there's always been some question mark, at least for a while, of voter suppression and rigging the system and so on and so forth. And each time I bring these international topics to view, I look at them. I don't just like to look at them in a vacuum. I like to look and see whether or not we are guilty of it as well, how does it affect us, and so on and so forth. And with reference to the North Carolina, where you have the current governor has indicated that he will not run again. But the interesting thing about it is that he was the beneficiary of the system being rigged. And when they had the hearings and so on, his own son testified against him. And he cried. His son said on the witness stand, "I warned him. This thing and this man is bad news." And then he is very emotional and crying, the congressman that is, and because he ended up with a couple of strokes into the hospital, and health-wise, he can't make another run. So, you know, these things are very interesting. And then some people are going to be probably upset about this. Remember that we are not immune from it. We had our own system here where you find that people reach to certain spheres in life that they want to fix the system in terms of the rules and so on and so forth to garner a desired outcome. But Ted, you and I play cricket, and Edric too, I'm not so sure about now. You used to play too?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But you're not up to our standard, right? Up to our level, like me and Ted and Edric.
Well, I don't think so. I don't think so. I know you were a cricketer, and Taylor was as well. No, I don't.
But Edric too.
You know, not a lot of people realize, Webo, that you played really very promising cricket. In fact, the first time I met you was in Jamaica when I lived there. You turned up with, I forget his name.
Phobel Rollins.
Rollins, and you were representing Nevis on the, I think, Leeward Island.
Leeward Islands youth team.
Leeward Island team as youths. And, you know, when I heard you were there, because I didn't know you, but I heard that there were two divisions, and I went to the airport, and I met you, and that was the first time that I knew of you. But because, you know, I'm a division living in Jamaica, when I heard that you represented Nevis and you know, and cricket and so forth, I went to look for you. And that's the first time I met you.
And I never forgot that. And it's amazing how those things, how important it is to a youngster.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because all that went through my mind at this time, because Ted came to me and I said, a big shot looking for me. You know what I'm saying? you know me, so you felt, and all through the years I never forgot that. In terms of, you know, cricket and my exploits, I didn't do as good as Edric, but you know. I made my little contribution. But anyway, thanks Ted for that. But I was saying that in terms of cricket, and a Division and a West Indian understand cricket. Sometimes there was a time when West Indies were ruling the world with cricket. But we always, whether we won or we lost the game, we go back and we play another game. But we were never accused of. When we couldn't play spin bowling very well, we practiced and we strategized and we got coaches and so on and so forth. And we always played by the rules. We were never accused of
cheating.
You know, changing. They don't call it cheating these days, Dr. Batley.
That's what it is.
They call it brilliance. You know, of looking at it and say, well, you know, according to how this register look or how this, if we were able to get rid of A, B, or this line or whatever, then we will win. And it bothers me, and that's what they were doing in the United States, in North Carolina and other areas, because the Democrats, now they're in certain positions, they're now filing certain things, passing certain rules and so on, because the practice of suppression, look at the list, and you'll see, if we're able to get Naya off and Dr. Bartlett off, that means we could win. That's not how we play cricket. Naya and Dr. Bartlett seem not to be for us, so let's campaign a little harder. Let's work a little harder to convince them. That's how we play cricket. Now, as I said, some people are going to get upset about it, but that's just the way it is. I get a break. When we come back, we'll have Edric W. Stanley. This is Thought That Get Results. We're back right after these.
Sugar City St. Kitts. Keep it sweet. Keep listening to Vaughn.
Builder's Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. They have got over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builder's Paradise has what you need. Oh, and remember, they are open all day Saturday to serve you better. Builder's Paradise, located at CAP Southwell Industrial Park, St. Kitts. Call them today at 466-4938.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results with Conrad Nye Liburd, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, Ted Hobson, and Edric W. Stanley. Good evening.
Good evening, Webbo. Good evening to my fellow panelists. And good evening to the people of St. Kitts and the gracious people of Nevis. Those who will be listening to us on the World Wide Web and through YouTube and the other medium. Again, it's always an obligation, in my view, for us to disseminate truthful information on this program. And it has gone through that long period of time simply because of commitment, the commitment Webbo has made, the commitment I have made, and the commitment Ted has made with reference to keeping this program on the air and also to keep it at the level where we think that people appreciate. Anyway, I am saying this to say this, that my being here, I listened very attentively to all the panelists, and in my judgment, I sometimes make a call, and usually I am right. And in that regard, I sometimes appoint myself as more or less the watchman. Anyhow, I recognize that Dr. Bartlett last program, reached out and said, well, Stanley and I have so. And I really didn't want to go down that rabbit hole with Dr. Bartlett. She's supposed to be responsible for whatever she says and may take Ted with her, may take Naya with her, but at the same time, not to take me with you. I don't know what you apologize for, but I am saying here, we have to be able to stand by what we say, how we say it. And if for some reason I feel that somebody has not gotten it right, which we should get it right because so many people are listening, and the program has reached to the point now where people have competed with a lot of other programs and recognize that we are at the top and we should stay at the top. Therefore, it is my obligation always to get it right. You mentioned, Rebo, about cricket. It's one of the greatest games that I have known. It's a game that teaches all of us, or those of us who have played it, a certain degree of discipline, and in that regard, we have taken that discipline into many other areas of our lives. As a result, I could say that cricket has done great things for me. You threw out a little plus there for me. I've never made it anywhere in the realm of cricket in terms of recognition, but I played the game well simply because of my obligation to look after my mother and to cook before she got home at the time. I never followed the game to the extent where I could have been, where you are attempting to say I was. I must say to the listening audience, I never made it any further than making my school side and to have competed with other schools, but I know I played the game very well to the extent where those whom I grew up with recognize that I played the game at that level, at that time, very well. And I know sometimes you try to catch me in a trap, but I would not be daunted simply because I have to remain focused. I have to concentrate as to what my thoughts are and not allow Weber to throw me off. You understand? So at one point, he threw out that one where I wicket keeped and bowled at the same time. And sure enough, is that right, Hendrik? I said, yes, but my focus was on saying what I'm saying without even paying attention to the trap that Webo set for me. But anyhow, we always had a lot of fun on this program with reference to certain personal episodes that we have gone through in the past. And of course, it made the program very interesting. And some listeners look forward to those little teasing moments. So we will continue. And therefore, I would say good night to everyone. And thank you for listening. And you are the ones who made the show what it is. And we ask you always to continue to listen and to participate, because we can't do it alone. Webo.
Yes. I wondered whether or not, well, since you were at the microphone, so to speak, whether or not you wanted to comment and, you know, those stuff that I mentioned, or whether you wanted to see whether anybody else wanted. I'd mentioned about the big scandal about how people were getting into these universities, because, you know, these are very prestigious universities, buying their way through, gangsters who set up thing and have a way in and stuff like that. You had the North Carolina situation where they have to redo that vote because of, you know, the messing with the list and so on and so forth.
Well, people are people, and people always attempt to find some way of getting ahead. Sometimes those who are not bent on hard work, forthrightness, truthfulness, as the case might be, would find some way simply because they want to get ahead. Consequently, they become part of skewing the system to their advantage. And time will tell. Time has always been the critical element when people would have been found wanting. And in that regard, those people who have skewed the system to get into Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and the Ivy League schools, some have actually done very well based on competitive hard work, but some people have decided to play the game of Barabbit, and as a result, they have attained, and as they have attained, they would acquire, because to have come out from one of those Ivy League schools, it represented at the time, even now, a certain level of pay, a certain level of recognition, and ultimately, when you do the measuring, they're at the top of the scale. But truly, you remember the old story of the agouti, the dog and the agouti, and how the agouti lost its tail. The dog, Mr. Bull, all decided that he wanted all animals with horns to go on a trip. And the dog was very clever, and he said, well, look, I want to go on that trip too. And therefore, the dog decided he was going to put on false horns. The agouti and the dog were very close, and the agouti wanted to go, but didn't figure out how to get on that trip. But when he realized that the dog was on the trip, and the boat was ready to leave the pier, he called out to Mr. Bull, who was the captain, there's a traitor on board. And as he was ordered to examine the horns, he caught Mr. Dog with false horns. Well, tossed him overboard with a skillful boat. And he chased the agouti into the mountain where his burrow was. And he was just about to dive into the burrow. And the dog made one giant leap, bit his tail, and as a result, he lost its tail. But back to the moral of the story. People are masters of systems, and they will always attempt to skew the system to get ahead. And therefore, it is nothing new. Here, we have people who have rigged the system. Here, we have people who will always attempt to rig the system. Those of us who know how to work hard, I mean, I'll tell you, we understand the competitiveness of getting ahead. Hence, we prepare ourselves physically, mentally, academically, in order to compete. As a result, some of us are still at the cutting edge of that competition. And it never stops until the coffin board knocks. Even some of us, or even some people who would be going to their death door, still trying to compete with death. At the same time, we must face reality. And time does catch up with most people, most events. And those who want to skew the system, ultimately, will be caught. Because, of course, if you get away here, you can't get away with God. So, well, the system will always be rigged simply because someone wants to get ahead. And they know exactly what the payout is ahead. And consequently, it's not going to stop. Politically, socially, economically, as the case might be. So, well.
So what does civil society do in the meantime? Do we just accept, well, it will always be done, so therefore allow it to be done because in the end people will be...
No.
That's what you're suggesting?
No, not at all.
Okay.
We know that ultimately the chickens come home to roost. I just gave you a little story as to what happened with the agouti and the dog.
That story was made up by you?
No, that was written.
Okay.
That was a written story. We read that all the way back at maybe...
Elementary school.
Well, it's at elementary school. But those stories are as profound then as they are today.
Okay. Naya, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, just a bit, Webo, because I suppose part of civilization calls for laws and rules, which is two different things. But Webo, in most things that we practice, even sometimes we are not aware of it. There is laws and there is rules. There's expectations. There is morals and other things that sometimes we don't even consider them, Webo, that tend to guide us going forward. Some people tend to go about their objective in a twisted way. And recently, we've been coming quite too familiar with that. And it makes me stop to think if this type of things, action, doings, are on the increase, or we are just hearing more about it. But I know in international politics, Webo, there is always things happening, you know, actions across the globe, ulterior motives, major mistakes have been made. For instance, the war in Iraq, weapons of mass destruction was never found. Big mistakes, you know. And sometimes I wonder if when the everyday people see these things happening, they think that within themselves they can actually try to twist things around, stretch the rules, change the rules, play by their own rule or whatever. But Webo, enough times rules and laws are based on time and long-standing principles that have been tried and tested. And so when people attempt to do these things, it's not going to last. It's not going to last. It's like sowing bad seeds. They're going to be found out. They're going to be caught out. If one believes in the laws of nature, you know, these things won't stand. But they tend to obfuscate the system and tend to move things in a direction where these people who employ these twisted ways hope to benefit. Here on the local front, I think we see a lot of that, Webo, or a lot of attempts of that, and sometimes it is so much happening that we're even afraid to talk about it. But we must not accept that as the norm or as an accepted trend going forward by participating in it or seeking to reap the benefit from it. That's another problem, Webo, because, you know, a lot of us see it happening, a lot of people see it happening, but they are in position to benefit, you know, so they allow it to happen. And hopefully when it crashes, the name might not be called. Webo, it is something that we should obviously shun from and really try to live up to the rules, live up to the expectations in whatever we are doing. If we hope to really enjoy a society, a better society going forward. When we look at the local frontier, Webo, we think of politics and we think of politicians. We think of bribery, we think of corruption. It's happening right here all around us. The power of money against one's integrity, the power of money against institutional integrity. You know, and it makes me wonder, Webo, if it's the impoverishedness of people's mind or the impoverishedness of well, cannot be when we're speaking of institutions like Yale and so forth. No, I cannot say much about that because it makes me wonder how to get that done. But of course, in this world of technology, there are people who are even more advanced than those who are setting the pattern, putting those limitations in place. So there are people who's going to, of course, break those barriers by their level of knowledge and understanding of this technological world that we live in. Are we more exposed to that now that everything is basically computerized?
Nayam, might I just take you back a little to a point you made earlier on the local front and corruption, and just point out something to you by way of information, because I think about a week or two ago there was a big headline in the news that St. Kitts Nevis is perhaps the least, maybe number 2 in terms of the least corrupt places, certainly in the OECS and rank, you know, across the world.
Pretty low, yes.
Mm-hmm. Right, and you know, I found it interesting because if you listen a lot of talk shows and maybe the talk, ordinary talk, this word is very, very prevalent on our lips. How corrupt the place is and so on and so forth. So it tells you either whoever did this assessment, either they have gotten it wrong, or if we are so clean, the rest of the world must be real dirty. So, as you said that, I just wanted to,
read
put
that
that
somewhere.
in right.
And they say we're second to Barbados in the Caribbean or in the Caribbean.
30. We are number 30.
We are number 30 in the world.
But second only to Barbados in the Caribbean.
What's the definition?
So why?
How do you define corruption?
Maybe we need to look to find out what was the definition used, because as I said, the reason why I pointed it out is because if you walk the streets and you live the life every day here, maybe we're just using the word loosely.
Not necessarily, though.
That's why I said maybe. That's
but it was a comparative study.
Quite often the opposition just said, the government is corrupt when they're in power. And when they're in opposition, they say that, and when they,
But you hear that from
I think
street
it's
people.
used very loosely.
But to be fair,
the scale of corruption that goes on in the world, Rebel, is so enormous that our little thing here can't compare to what's going on. And Rebel, America, when it looks at, America regards itself as exceptional. Because of a thing called exceptionalism, meaning America is way and above all the other countries in the world in terms of how you behave, how honest you are, and all of that. You are exceptional if you are an American. And I think Mr. Stanley knows the word exceptionalism, because it is the conservative put forward that word all the time to describe Americans. And the thing is that America looked down on all of these countries, these third world, called them banana republics, accused them of corruption, accused them of money laundering, and accused them of everything imaginable. But when you look at America, the amount of corruption and money laundering and every ill or evil that you could think of, financially and otherwise, exists in the United States. And whatever could be done to be deceitful will be done in the United States. No matter what, they will find a way of getting around any rules or regulations. So it wasn't surprising for me when this man, Singer, I think his name, thought of the brilliant idea of setting up the system wherein a lot of very wealthy people would want their children to go to the top schools. And so he bribed coaches, athletic coaches, football coaches, all of those, because if you are in athletics, if you are in sports generally, you get credit for that. And universities are very happy to take a small proportion of their intake based on athletics, sports, and so forth. And so this man thought of that idea and was able to bribe a number of coaches in some of these prestigious universities and get rich people's children into some of the best the Ivy schools of the United States, and of course he was able to get people to sit the SAT and everything for certain students and so forth. Anything that could be done in the United States to deceive, it would be found. It's a very fertile ground for that kind of thing. So, I'm tired of Americans looking down on our islands and calling us corrupt when they're the worst corrupt people in the whole world, as far as I'm concerned.
Dr. Bartlett?
Yes, Webo. All I would say to that is I think Mr. Hobson has really laid the foundation for what I wanted to say. But what we see here is just a new day, and it's the same old game. The difference, and I know you use cricket as an example, the difference here is that in cricket you have rules and people know what the rules are before, and you have a disciplinary committee. Most cricket associations would have a disciplinary committee that comes as part of the whole package. Around here, and I can't speak for America, I can only speak for around here, you did make the observation that, you know, every day you hear people using the word around here, you know, that, you know, your politician on one side would say that the other side is corrupt, and then you see, you know, the other side would, you know, take turns. But the unfortunate thing is around here, it seems that we don't have a mechanism in place, you know, to correct our people. You know, when they do wrong, whether it is bribery or whatever people are being charged with, it is for the most part, is swept under the rug, because who are the arbiters, really? You know, I mean, we speak about civil society, and one would imagine that civil society should be the final arbiters as it relates to politicians. But we are so partisan around here, it seems now, that I can see someone who, you know, maybe a representative, you know, in my party, you know, and he does something wrong, and I see, you know, I can't condemn him, you know, and then by the time things change and someone else does it, I'm the same one to condemn the same person, and I just don't understand on what moral standing, you know, we make such judgments sometimes. Because I was listening to a radio program, and I heard one, you know, politician, you know, speaking, you know, so eloquently about what he saw was going on, which was so wrong. And then I could imagine that he would have even spoken about it. I'm like, this is what people used to call hypocrisy, you know, but it happens, and people around here we just recycling the same politicians over and over, and we expect a better result. And I just don't understand, why is it we don't take more of a moral high ground around here as it relates to the people who have to go to the polls and elect people, you know, because they're not being held accountable. Because you're going to reward a man for doing wrong? I mean, that ain't making any sense, and then we complain about it. As it relates to bribery, sometimes I just don't understand why some people would do it, because people in good positions sometimes would do things, and I'm like, why are you doing that? You can afford that. Just the other day, I think last week, we made reference to the situation as it related to Netanyahu right in Israel. I mean, this is a man who is exposed. He's been in position for such a long time, and he's taking pink champagne. You know, pink champagne, a line of pink champagne and something else. I don't remember what it was, because it's so trivial. And you're going to compromise your integrity, you know, for something that you yourself can afford. And so I just don't understand sometimes why people make certain decisions, except to say that they think that they could get away with it because they're bright. You know, they're smarter than everybody else, and they probably could get away with a lot of things. Because it has been said, and you know, I don't like to accept that that is how we are really, and you're always asking if that is the kind of people we are, but it has been said that we just have 10 minutes, you know, concentration span, because they come, we talk about something for a little bit, and then it goes, you know, and the same people come back to you to represent you, and you forgot what they would have done last year, and it's about time that we hold people accountable. But it's not likely to change. It is an endemic problem, not only in the United States, but wherever you have men in power, it is likely that you would have them compromising their integrity.
I made a notation, Dr. Bartlett, of you, and when you mentioned or questioned whether or not there's any mechanism in place to correct these acts and so on, correct?
Right.
But the truth is, though, that there is. No, not that. We have laws, because when the names were taken off the list a few years ago, there was a strong view that nothing will happen, because no judge or anybody will overturn a sitting government. And so perhaps the people who did it were emboldened by that. But the rules were in place, and then in terms of the regulations for the governing of the elections and so on, they have bribery laws, rules against bribery and so on.
But
so there are
there are laws, yes, against bribery, but all the parties do it.
Right.
I can see people running around getting plywood and all kind of thing, and right in the daylight, nobody's hiding this.
Right, but
and they're doing it on both sides. I'm like, so who is going to be the arbiter? Who?
But what I was pointing out is the question that you asked, whether or not there was a mechanism in place. Whether or not
it's not a mechanism, though.
Okay, so then what do you...
That might be a framework,
okay,
so what, for doing something, but if there is no one who is going to take they take the law and apply it.
So then
there isn't a mechanism.
So the question is then, for my own edification, when you ask if there's a mechanism in place, what do you mean?
I mean that you must have a system that punishes. It starts, if someone breaks the law, it doesn't just stay, well, somebody just frown and say, well, I didn't like it, what he did was wrong. But someone, and you remember last week I said, I think it's about time that we had a Attorney General who was probably neutral or, not aligned with parties, who might be able to do that. So that would be a part of what I would consider to be the mechanism.
But the system is in place. You are talking about now the individual, right?
Yeah, but if you put a system in place that, you say, okay, you need a captain, but you don't have a captain appointed.
No, but no, keep in mind, Dr. Bartlett, you have a system in place, has nothing to do with who you put to work the system, whether or not the system is good or bad, right? You made reference to an Attorney General last time. Mr. Brand expanded on it. And I've said once, this is the 999th time that I'm saying it. I have a friend who is a pastor who, when they were talking about reform, the electoral system and all sort of things, I said, Pastor, by and large, the system is okay. If you have dishonest people working it, the system is going to seem dishonest, but it's not so much the system as the people. Now, a few years ago, most of the debate around here was what? We need to change or reform the system. And then we reformed it. Eventually, you know what they did? They put different people in the same system. And all of a sudden, I'm not saying it's 100%, but you don't hear the same type of rhetoric. So the reason why I picked up on that, to point out that indeed there are systems in place, because as the example I was using with the case that actually went to court, punishment was meted out. Some people figured it was too light or whatever and so on. But the point is, had there been a different adjudicator using the same rules, the punishment could have been different. Ted, you agree with me that in most of these systems, instances, a system is in place for punishment?
Of course. I think what Dr. Bartlett is talking about is probably enforcement, not strong enough. The enforcement mechanism is not strong enough, I think so. But the rules are there, the laws are there to govern much of the infringement that takes place in public life,
Of course, and it comes back again to the area that we always end up. And the last time we discussed something like this, the rhetorical question that I had, and I asked Ted, I said, Ted, but do we have the courage? The systems are there. And that's one of the reasons why we get a lot of ratings, because in terms of laws and systems and so on, we have them on the books. They're on the books, everything. Somebody had mentioned, it might have been Ted, something about integrity in public life, right? Now, here's what's happening with that. You campaign, you talk about it, everybody says integrity in public life. All you have to do, go in the house, say you have passed the integrity in public life, and then you say, good. And nothing changes. Because it hasn't worked, there is no enforcement, nothing. But then you can always say, well, we have it.
But to the same point I was trying to make, Webo, it's not just good enough to have a law, but if it's not operationalized, then what is the value of it? When I say a mechanism, all I meant was you must have a support structure in place such that if the outcome of what you're trying to achieve, you get it achieved. Because it's not good enough for us to have, people been talking about bribery. It is on the books, yes. And when we start something as glaring as bribery during an election period, and that is not being addressed, but who is going to address it? Who is going to address it? Who has the courage to do that? You know, because people are not, you don't have enough independent players.
But I could answer that question for you, Dr. Bartlett. Who is going to do it?
Yes.
The people who are employed to do it. Because to each of these things, we have people in the positions, you know.
But they're handicapped for the most part.
By who or by what?
But by whom would have appointed them for the most part. That's how it happens. And that's why I say if you don't have an independent system in place or structure in place, then you compromise the integrity of the whole system.
Yeah, but I would argue the systems are independent.
Really?
The structure
Yeah,
isn't.
well,
Yeah, it's designed that way.
Well, I wasn't here. I wasn't here last week, Webber, when Dr. Bartlett, because she just raised the matter of the Attorney General. I think what people have to understand that the Attorney General speaks for the government, but we have an officer who is independent, absolutely independent, and that is the Director of Public Prosecution. He was appointed. He doesn't take orders from anybody. The system set him up as an independent person, and he could bring charges against anybody, and no government could stop him. In the Constitution, he is absolutely independent.
There you go.
Absolutely. So you don't need an Attorney General who is neutral. You have a neutral person. The Director of Public Prosecution is that independent person. He has a staff, he has an office, and no Prime Minister, no Governor General could tell him anything. The other day, he made a number of pronouncements. Some people criticize him, and the fact is that he's independent. He could say what he wants. He can do what he wants. He could bring cases against anybody he wants, including the Prime Minister if he feels so.
Is he from Mars or he's from here?
Well, he's not from here.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that there are forces that impact upon his own thinking, and as a result...
We know that, Webber. We know that. Every individual, no matter how independent you are, you have certain prejudices.
Exactly.
So we understand.
These are the forces.
Yeah.
And as a result, no matter unless you're going to put a robot there.
Right, but right. So Ted is in essence supporting.
In theory.
Is in essence, he's supporting what I said.
In fact and in practice.
Yes, that's how the system is set up, right? And it all comes down just like the electoral laws. They're set up a certain way, and at the end of it, it depends on who.
Administering.
It's just like let's go back to cricket. You got an umpire, and if he adjudicates the way the rules and so on, you likely will have a fair game. But you can well have an umpire who tells himself, Edgewick is not going to make any much runs here today. Right?
Yeah.
From the time, and we've had instances like that, all the opposing team has to do is appeal.
Yeah.
And the umpire put his finger up.
And you have no recourse.
So yeah, exactly. So it basically comes down to, again, who we are. And then if the majority of the people just expect that things will just work automatically like that, it doesn't work like that. Because a person will always try something if he feels he will get away with it. I predict that way back then, that we have not seen, well, we've seen a curtailing of it, or it did not happen as often. But when we were having the court case, everybody was watching closely. When I said everybody, all across the islands. Because depending on the result of that, how persons got away or didn't get away, people will follow. So it's very, very important in terms of standing up, making a stand. If there's a quotation I like to read, evil is what happens when good people stay aside and grumble.
Or say nothing.
Or say nothing.
You see,
Which is
sometimes
our society.
the system is designed for self-policing. Unfortunately, you don't have robots. And consequently, there are forces that impact on the consciousness of the individual, and he reacts to certain forces, and in that regard, he sometimes makes a judgment call, and with that judgment call, it might be prejudicial. And therefore, the system is not working the way it is designed to work.
Let me ask you this, Edric. You think you're likely to see again, maybe not in the same manner, but you think you're likely to see again people expunging names from the voters list?
Yes.
You're so certain about that, you almost let me didn't finish the question.
It's the fallibility of man.
Yes.
We are fallible. And when we are presented with certain forces, again, whether it is family, money, other interests, I mean, people talk about money as bribery. Netanyahu, as Pat mentioned, was given pink champagne, which he can afford.
Now you think we're likely to see that happen again, in terms of the names, in a different manner, maybe
Yeah,
the same, but taken again.
Attempts would be made again. Yeah, I think so.
Ted, you think so?
Yeah, the heart of man is desperately evil. And Webo, I mean, more and more, there is a desire on certain people for power.
Power!
And they'll use every mechanism in order to achieve it.
And talking about power, the other notation I have here, and I'm very saddened by it when I look at the news today, this evening, and it hurts me to see how the people in Venezuela, the poor people, are suffering. There's no electricity, no power, people are dying, and so on and so forth. And these guys, the leaders, they're beating their chest, figuring they're now getting a little advantage here and there, and people are dying. So I ask myself, if one of these days poor people can't get enough.
No, they rise up, they do rise up.
They're in the army barracks.
They do rise up, but the presence of ammunition.
Well, that's why you have revolution.
That's that's when people do rise up.
You had it in the Soviet Union.
Revolution happened all over the world.
1918 or whatever it was, and they rose up against the system and changed it. That's why you have revolution. People rise up.
Civil war.
And they didn't have to get people from America or anywhere else to do it. They did it themselves,
But that's difficult to achieve at this
it's
point
very difficult right now,
in Venezuela.
Yeah.
If there's a rise up of people against the administration, of course they're going to be backed and supported by. So it won't be a kind of internal uprising without that foreign influence. I think America has a lot to do with the present situation.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
and
I never heard about them all of a sudden.
Yeah,
all of a sudden there are sanctions, and now.
I think they can make better of the situation in Venezuela if they want to.
The ordinary people, the more they revolt.
Yeah.
And really, what they're getting at is to try and make it so difficult for the army, for individual army people, that they turn against the government,
Not turning against the government is to be humanitarian. The army should be neutral and make a public declaration that they are completely neutral and they will not attempt to
But
back
army
the
is there to
government.
support the government. That's what they're
Not
there for.
necessarily, no.
Well, let me
No,
ask.
the army is there to defend the country and its peoples.
Let me ask this question. The leaders, of course, I understand the argument you're making about the quest for power. But do we learn anything from Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi and all these people who were so powerful, and at the end of the day, we see what happens? So the people who are looking on, who have quest for power as well, do they learn anything from that?
No. The thing is that once they are able to achieve power themselves, they work the system to ensure that they're maintained or they're kept in power by the barrel of the gun. Because I would tell you, if you have defections or a public declaration of the armed forces in Venezuela that we are not here to support any side, ultimately, Maduro
What are they there
will
for?
walk.
What are
Maduro
they
will
there-
walk.
what are they for?
They're there to defend the country against external forces.
That's right.
External forces primarily.
Yeah.
But Maduro wants to use those forces internally to prop up himself. But like I said, if there's a public declaration or if there's a defection of the armed forces personnel, you would see
Why
a
is it?
shift,
Why is
a
it
major
that,
shift.
Why is it that people can't send money to Venezuela? The governments of the region are not being able to send any money. Jamaica have money for Venezuela, and the United States is preventing them from sending the money. So how are they going to buy food? How are they going to buy stuff?
Look,
You know, I mean, the whole thing is to squeeze the government so that and the people are going to suffer. Why is it they couldn't get a humanitarian organization like the UN to bring in the food? Huh? And so it looks as if they're really interested in doing the food. Why is it that Guaido must bring in the food?
Isn't somewhere it is believed that it was not allowed to come in because it is believed that the UN or the Red Cross or whomever.
What they're saying is not going to take any money from any food from Guaido, and the Americans said Guaido must bring the food in.
He's not taking any food from anybody simply because he wants to ensure.
No, I think if the United Nations were to come and bring in the food and says this is neutral, it's just to feed people. But this is not what has been done, Mr. Stanley.
I don't know what the latest
I'm neither
dispensation has been.
I'm not for anybody.
Right.
But one thing I know is this.
But let the food come in. Why are you going to prevent the food from coming in? People going to be there starving. Let the food come in.
But look,
It makes no difference
what
who
I'm
brings in
saying,
the food.
why you have charitable organization? Why can't they bring in the food?
They can't bring it in because they're afraid of being killed.
Okay, let me accommodate this caller. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. Yes, Mr. Herbert, let me start, please. The election petition case in Nevis. What if the CCM was in Venezuela? Do you think they would have had a chance with an election petition case against Maduro, considering how the judges are and that? You know, it would have been much easier for democratic rules to go in Nevis, considering how the election. Let's look at the election. You know, how these elections have been run in Venezuela over the years. Has it been fair? Would a CCM government survive, a CCM party survive in Venezuela under this kind of regime? Next thing, Mr. Hubbard, quickly. In 1493 up to 1623, the name of Nevis was St. George. St. Martin. I think it was St. George. Just look at the amount of age over 100 years. From 1623 to the 1722 now it came Nevis. Once it was under Columbus, one first name, so Thomas Warner, second change name. What is the real true name of Nevis? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me get a break and come right back. This is Thought That Get Results with Edric W. Stanley. Ted Hobson, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, and Conrad Nye Library. Your phone calls on 1-869-469-1616 or 1700. We'll be back after these.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. They have got over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Oh, and remember, they are open all day Saturday to serve you better. Builders Paradise, located at CAP Southwell Industrial Park, St. Kitts. Call them today at 466-4938.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results with Edric W. Stanley, Conrad Nye Library, Ted Hobson, Dr. Patricia Bartlett. Let's go to the lines. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hi. Good night. I would like to say something about the cricket, right? Okay, I used to play cricket, play for Stones, and afraid the bar, so I just ball, and me back last. So, for Rollins, right, he was the captain. I tell him, put me anywhere you want to go. Anyway, he put me in first set. Oh my God. But when me see a ball come straight up my face, he duck. Then I tell him to put me way down where we could see the ball better. Put me third man, I take an easy game.
Okay. Thank you. Enjoy your evening. Yes, Edric.
Well, I'll be honest. You look at the United States has, and they always said, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because it is the leader of the world, it has everything in it. And therefore you will find bribery at the highest level, cheating at the highest level, power, money, everything.
As you'll find anyway. Doesn't matter how big or how small the society is. You're good with that?
Sure.
Okay.
So I never subscribe to the notion that the United States must take a back seat in whatever it's doing. The end of the Olympics, the three of them on the world stage, United States, Russia, China, in terms of medals. And you use that as a barometer as to where they are. And therefore, I believe she should continue to play the role as the world's policeman and to bring order and to ensure that certain fundamental principles from a democratic point of view be adhered to globally.
And in doing that, you are also implying it must police itself.
Oh, sure.
As you're doing now
Sure.
with your president.
Sure, it should police itself. And ultimately, we will see where Trump winds up. He continues to reiterate. There's no collusion because that's the Achilles heel. No collusion. Every time he gets the opportunity. Simply because one who had the goods on him decided to take the rap without spilling the beans. That's Manafort. And we will ultimately see what happens with Donald Trump.
Well, that approach is scary. You know, that approach, it's almost sound like the ISIS intention to take over the world and make it all the way they want it. America or any other place with that kind of intention create a dangerous world. People must allow to live and be who they are, and system must allow to exist. There are other school of thoughts, you know. I can't see why people is going to end up being the rope in the tug-of-war between democracy and communism or socialism.
Just let me take this now. I'll get back to you. Good evening. Thanks for holding.
Yes, good evening, the panelists. And good evening, because Edric Stanley tell Amarella say hello. And you take care, everybody. Good program.
All right. Thank you. Naya,
yes, Webo, I can't.
Naya, just give me another second. Thank you for holding. Good evening.
Yes, quickly, Mr. Herbert. It is said that Russia is in a line with Venezuela. Well, if we, the Caribbean islands, are aligned with Venezuela, aren't we not aligned with Russia? Thank you very much.
Okay, Naya, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's a fight for. I mean, the biggest problem in Venezuela, because it has that kind of socialist tendencies, and America don't want that in the region, basically. And it's sad to see the people being the rope in this type of struggle, you know. I mean, it's happening all over the globe. When one has the intention of globalization, of what they think is right, there are other people with other theories, you know, other political systems, other beliefs, and you must let them exist once humanity is not being sacrificed. You know, I've seen countries exist.
Once humanity is not being sacrificed,
Yes.
determined by who?
Well, that's a very good thing. That's a very good question, because a lot of these things are subjective to a certain extent, you know? I mean, by the people themselves, not by America. By the people themselves, because America has entered into a lot of international affairs, and at the end of the day, the situation became worse. You know, Iraq would never settle down. In their search for mass destruction, they have destroyed Iraq, destroyed people, destroyed family, hang the whole government. Every government official was hanged, and family member of Saddam Hussein was wiped out. And the place can't heal up to now. It's been trouble ever since up till now. These places were beautiful places. Of course, they wasn't perfect places, but they've been made worse by American intervention, you know. And what we see in Venezuela today, I mean, it's very serious, because I know the situation there is being caused, and it can be brought to an end by the big United States of America. But then they want to see the people suffer to the extent where they yield to their likeness and their political system, and then things will be all right again. That can't work.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, Mr. Hubbard, what you think about what happened in Haiti? Should allow the whole Caribbean to become a Haiti, considering how the governments of the Caribbean, you know, align themselves when they get in. They no longer wish to speak out on internal matters. They have this saying, let internal affairs deserve their own thing. But then the leaders are destroying the people, while leaders of the Caribbean who align themselves in all kind of groupings just sit back and allow the people. It's the people that suffer. The leaders never suffer with the policies that they implement, because who knows, them could have a house in Timbuktu. Thank you very much.
Well, as it relates to Caribbean leaders in Venezuela, I'm not sure if they're really standing up in any strong and decisive way, in a sense. You know, I think they're very frightened and careful and tentative in dealing with the Venezuela situation.
I think you're right. I think you're right, Naya. Yeah. You know, I remember a press conference many years ago when Mandela was being questioned. He had left the island. He had become prime minister, and he was being interviewed. And this reporter asked him, "Why is it you don't condemn Libya and some other country? I can't remember which one." He says, "I'm not condemning them because when I needed help, they're the ones who came to my help."
Yeah, Cuba came.
So, you know, it's natural that, I mean, when one needs help and somebody comes to your rescue, why are you going to turn around and condemn them? I mean, this is ungrateful. And I can never forget that.
Well, based on what happened with Mandela, I agree that he could not have condemned them simply because they offered help. And when we look at what occurred in South Africa at the time...
Sorry, Cuba and Libya. Cuba sent people, Cuba did all kind of thing, and then they want Mandela to condemn Cuba. I mean, he couldn't do it. He said, "I'm not going to do it."
Well, it was more or less...
And so the same attitude I take in regards to Venezuela. I understand the suffering of the people, but I'm not going to say one bad thing about Maduro, because the other day when the government needed some money, $16 million, not long ago, they take up $16 million US dollars and give it to Sinkis Nevis, you know. And the Carib thing, what do they call it?
The Petro-Carib.
Petro-Carib is millions and millions of dollars they're saving these islands for. If the new government come in, that's done.
Yeah.
I mean,
what barometer are you using, Ted, to measure
what?
That if the new government or when the
but
new
they
government
have condemned it. They've already condemned it.
Listen, we weren't getting oil for free. We had to pay a certain level.
Yes,
in
Mr.
terms of
Stanley,
dollar.
but everybody has accepted that the system that Chavez introduced has helped the Caribbean enormously.
I'm not saying he didn't, but we weren't getting a handout.
When nobody said it's a handout, we are saying it has helped the islands. And these islands are on the verge. I mean, everything we do here, you know, whether it's sugar, whether it's the financial services, whether it's Citizen by Investment, America has come down strongly against them.
Okay, Ted, let me just take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, Mr. Herbert, let's go back to what he was speaking about, what Mr. said. People has been compromised. This is why politics and politicians can't come out and say things against each other, because they are being compromised. Look at it, money. It's because of money. I asked a question. Let me ask you one thing. Something, Mr. Herbert. We had a black president in America. We had Clinton. Why then did we have to go to Venezuela? You know, I always wonder, why did we have to go to Venezuela to get oil when we had a black president in America that everybody boasts about? And then we had the Clinton. Nobody speaks about the Clinton Foundation and Haiti.
Get oil from Venezuela.
Yeah, but
so I don't know what you're talking about.
But no, but then look at it. That is what I'm saying. We compromise ourselves that we cannot speak out on the issue of Venezuela. If it happened in Nevis, I find it hard for you all to speak. Because if you cannot speak on it, no, it is happening to black people. Would you be able to speak if it happened in St. Kitts Nevis? Mr. Herbert, one last thing. There's a case that is coming up. I'm not going to speak on the case. I'm going to speak on the allegation of personal information being given to citizens to appear in court, and I'm scared. I'm wondering, where is my personal information with this government? Because if an opposition leader could be taking a matter like that to court, and lawyers speaking out about it, what about me, the common man on the road? I could remember when light bill and things were being read. Mr. Herbert, I said I'm not going to politics. But if this is the way people behave when they're in politics, I'm not going to destroy my life. Because we have been compromised as citizens. We sell the vote, people buy vote, and nothing for it. The whole world now. Every year, over 300 names are being challenged. What you call that? Good practice, good governance, or illegal practices? Thank you very much.
The other thing, thank you. The other thing I wanted to mention quickly, I don't know how many of you picked it up, but I find it interesting. It's innovative. You know, they had the elections in the British Virgin Islands a couple of weeks ago, and the winner, the Andrew Foy, who's now the premier, the candidates that he had who won, they were all new persons, not a lot of experience and so on and so forth. So he names a deputy for 3 months. And then he says he's going to rotate for a year. And then depending on who looks strongest, then he makes it permanent.
It's a new one.
Yeah, well, he says it's and I find that that's very interesting because it tells you that the leverage that the Premier has to be able to say, well, okay, you'll be a deputy for 3 months. Ted, Edric, 3 months coming up for you. Naya, 3 months coming for you. Dr. Batty, 3 months. And then when I'm finished, I look at, and then I'll decide which one of you will be. He has done that, you know. So you wonder, did they discuss it before? You know what I'm saying? But it's just, and when they asked the Premier about it, he said, well, he is an unconventional leader.
I like his style, Webo. Maybe we should see more of that. When you mention that though, maybe this is an aside, and maybe I should let other people weigh in on that before I even try to branch off. But I'm kind of pulled to do so. We need more transparency around here. I find, you know, as it relates to sometimes the jobs that are available. We find that a lot of times people talking about nepotism, but sometimes in a class and to the front, you know, you pick the person at the front. It seems like that is what is happening, you know, and it's happening a little too often for comfort, you know, and I'm hoping that we would put something in place. It's about time we revolutionize the thing, because we keep saying that we're putting young people in charge, but we're not seeing anything different. You know, if young people are going to take over, we're going to have to come with a different spirit of the way we do things. We have to do things different and not just age shame people like Ted and myself, you know, age shame us out of the game, and then you take over and you're just doing more of the same that we used to do. That is not innovation. And I commend the Premier, you know, for doing that. Because he's doing things different, you know, and a little unorthodox sometimes, you know. But like I said, and I want to go back to my central point, I'm hoping that we'll see the day when even government jobs would be up, you know, be advertised, that, you know, people can position yourself, you know, to compete, you know, fairly, you know, to get the jobs that are available. It can't be fair that every time when, you know, jobs are being dished out, is the people who are in the front of the class that get these jobs. We ought to have a system in place so that, you know, Naya and I and Mr. Hobson could, you know, right, we have an equal opportunity, and then you call us in for an interview and things like that. Because sometimes you see people in some positions and it's like, how did that person get that position? You know, they're ill-equipped to deal with the position that they've been placed in, and then the country as a whole suffers, you know. And having said that, though, I wanted to just to, as a point of interest, though, speak to the nepotism that I've been hearing. You know, for weeks I've been hearing, and I think it even goes to the level of the Leeward Island debate, that people are talking that the Prime Minister, and I didn't know that, because sometimes if people don't say things, you don't know the whole story. And then I happened to be listening, and no less a man than the guy John L. Powell, and I think he's in a position that he ought to know. He was explaining that the positions that were made reference to, that one person is in this position and that person, the principal person to appoint them was not indeed the person who they're now accusing of nepotism. I'm like, well, if we have that information, why aren't we sharing it, you know? Because really, I thought so too, you know. I was like, how the man could appoint his sister this and his sister that? And then when I heard the whole story that they were not even indeed appointed by him, I was like, well, if we need to always get the full story. And I don't know, I keep saying it's communication, but I'm not applying for the role of communications officer, but I think that a little more ought to be done sometimes.
Yeah, but it could be nepotism still.
How? If someone else appoints somebody and you come and meet a situation, why are you trying to suggest that maybe the person should be demoted, or you turn away the person or something?
I think I know what you're talking about. Those people who are appointed under the last administration. So what do you want? The new administration to take them out?
Turn them away? That doesn't sound like it makes sense to me. But anyway.
It don't make any sense.
I just said that. I just shared that for what it was worth. I don't know if it is worth anything, but I'm just saying sometimes we have to be careful in how we, people we follow. Sometimes we just get, the wind of something and we take
Well,
it.
it's a little society, Pat, and sometimes clarification is good. Sometimes those who are accused can come forward too. What's wrong with that?
But maybe we're not all listening to the same radio station. I don't
know.
Public officials, civil servants don't like to come out.
Well, I know, but sometimes even government ministers, we hear a lot of things. Who own this, who own that, who don't own this, whose excavator is this, and all kind of things. Sometimes it's important because that's where the word corruption is overused, and it's back to communication again, Pat, Yes, that would help. That will help,
Because when you're hearing one side of the story all the time, sometimes it gets a little, But it's not for me to say.
And when you don't get no feedback, then you kind of just believe and accept that that's the case, that's what's happening. And then you wonder, well, how come we only number 2 in the Caribbean for corruption?
Well, I don't know what they were measuring. Sometimes it's good to know sometimes what people are measuring.
Communication is part of transparency, and I think governments should really, have that even an office that really deals with the, I mean, you can't overburden the office. You can't answer all questions. You can't bark at every, but certain.
Well, let me ask you. Let me ask this then. Go ahead.
With the system that Premier Foy has employed, he, of course, has been chosen from among all the elected leaders as one who has the most influence or respect, and thus he became Premier. But it was not designed just at that time. It was based on the grouping, how they came together, and that determination would have determined who might have been the strongest among all of them who were elected and ultimately sat or got the position of Premier.
But wasn't he leader of the party?
Well, once you are the leader of the party, then it means you make certain decisions, and those people who are part of that party would accept those decisions. So if he decides to somewhat sectionalize, for the want of a better word, the rotation of the positions of the position of Deputy Premier, I think it is within his prerogative to do it. It is not a novel idea. It's not a real new idea, because even though some people might have been given the position as deputy leader, when one goes away, depending on the size of the cabinet, maybe the person who is third in line with influence would become the acting premier. Even in Nevis, we know that the Honorable Eric Evelyn has deputized when the Honorable Mark Brantley and the Honorable Alexis Jeffers are not here. So it's not completely foreign. It's not a completely foreign idea. But when the rotation has reached to its level and it makes a determination as to some prominence with reference to the person who is going to be the true deputy leader, that decision would be made. It probably has been made already, but he's just giving everybody a little do. The Prime Minister Douglas, at one point, changed the cabinet and positions with many of the elected leaders, and that was something that was implemented during his administration. The Kennedy administration did not do something like that, and when I recognized that the Douglas administration decided to change around all the cabinet positions, I thought it was a good idea, but it was new, in my view. So what Premier Foy is doing in Tortola is not totally new. He might have been he might be piggybacking on the idea of what Prime Minister Douglas did during his administration.
The other thing, while we're on that, the British Virgin Islands, what is interesting about that scenario as well is that, as I mentioned, there is a very new team, very young team, and one of the persons who won, I guess some persons didn't expect, it was a lot of surprises, and one of them declared early he doesn't want any ministries. Let me take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yes, Mr. Herbert, after the last election, the federal election, the DPP changed because I'm aware that the NRP asked the Farmer Labour Party to do an investigation into certain things that happened in Nevis. So I'm just wondering, could the government change the DPP so that the investigation could stop? If that investigation was not stopped, why has that matter after 3 years of this Labour government? That matter has not been brought to court. I'm just wondering if the investigation was stopped. So I'm kind of asking if any police or any lawyer, you could find out that if the government could remove the DPP so that it could influence the investigation of matters, gone by. Thank you very much.
Okay, someone can address that in a minute, but I was just saying the other thing that is very interesting is that one person said out of the gate that they didn't really want any, ministry, right? And then the other thing that was noteworthy, because I follow these things closely to look at the behaviors, and see how things work. The other thing that was interesting, the government, of course, it was a new government sworn in, the opposition, the government that was there last. And what happened was they self-destruct because they couldn't get it together. The ruling party, I think, split up in 3. And then these were seasoned, experienced persons because they were going back for they had 2 terms, so they were experienced. And then one of them, the deputy, went and formed a party. The other senior person went and formed a party. The others were running with one of the parties, right? So that split up in 3. And the irony about it, those senior persons who I knew, they even lost their seat. So
miscalculation.
Miscalculation.
Oh, yes. They thought they had the influence and the power base, but the structure caved in simply because it just wasn't there.
Yeah, that you see, and all these things tell you and teach you, certain things. But somebody had asked a question. I think it was Naya, or it might have been a caller, and they were asking, how do we know these things? We probably need to give more information, etc., etc. Correct? Was somebody was raising it? Mm. So I was thinking here to myself that most of these politicians are on the radio. Our premier has a talk show every Wednesday, and if there's one thing even friend and foe will say about him, he engages.
That's right.
Right? The Prime Minister has, and the Premier also has press conferences monthly. The Prime Minister has press conferences regularly as well. I don't know if he has a regular show, but I know other ministers have shows.
He has a regular show.
Right, and so on. So sometimes you wonder whether or not it's just not rhetoric. And maybe we don't want to take on the necessary responsibility that we should. And I segue quickly into something else in terms of wanting people to do the work. Because I listened to the news item we had this morning on Liat. And after all these years, they said that they finally did a study. And one of the main things that is hemorrhaging Liat, surprise, low productivity. But everybody knows that because everybody keeps complaining about bad service, etc., etc., etc. But they just use a nice term, low productivity. But where is that not happening amongst us?
It shouldn't be happening.
You just have to walk the streets of Charlestown to realize that so many of the civil servants are on the road. So you wonder, you know, and you go in the offices and you wonder.
Well, I would say that simply because LIAT has been around for quite some time, people now just take it for granted that it will always be around. And we have had an extensive debate or conversation last Tuesday night on LIAT. Same thing happens to a lot of people who work for companies, other companies, not only here but also in other jurisdictions. But again, if we were to look at the history of LIAT in terms of longevity, I left here in 1966 and LIAT was the carrier. You measure the number of airlines that have
come and gone
and are now on the trash heap of history. Therefore, the question must be asked, why is LIAT still around? And LIAT is only around simply because of the subsidy from from some of the governments. Hence, all the governments should now come to grips with the harsh reality that LIAT must be kept afloat. And those of us who continue to fly, whenever we fly, we have to look at where we spend our money. I imported some vehicles, and some people say, but where do you pay the tax? Man, it's better in St. Kitts. I said, I'm paying mine in Nevis, even though it's more. Because I had to show some partiality with reference to where I want my taxes to be paid. Because
why is it more? Is there
I can't tell you the reason. But several vehicles that I brought in, people asked me, where did you pay the import tax? And I said, I ensure that my vehicles would find the destination, Nevis, and this is where I pay my tax. I could have cleared them in St. Kitts. I didn't. And I'm saying this to say this, that those who are flying must fly on LIAT, because it's not for the money, but it's for the safety and to ensure that this service continues. Because if you were to again measure the time that has been flying, I don't know what time before 1966. But
okay, let me just take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. You're on the air.
Here. Yes, and now you're talking on a topic here that I normally criticize, and I still is going to criticize it. Gentlemen and ladies, we all have to face the fact. Remember many years ago, the former Prime Minister, Dr. Denzel Douglas, said the sugar industry was a cancer and we have to get rid of it. He got rid of it. Gentlemen, for years, most of all of these countries in the Caribbean has pumped millions of dollars into LIAT, the taxpayers' money. And gentlemen, it's true that LIAT is 60 years old, but we must ask the question, why are they here 60 years? One, the government them give LIAT the monopoly. Other airlines from throughout the Caribbean has come along, and they squeeze them out because the government them vote and said, no, we're not accepting anybody else. And those who come along did get a chance, did not last long, guys, because of the monopoly control of LIAT. Yes, they may have a no crash record, right? Yes, we appreciate that. But guys, look at it. All of these millions of dollars that we have taxpayers' money we have pumped into Liat. Liat has not bring forth anything for us. Yes, they bring the people to here, but look at it. They're cutting staff for years. They eliminate some of their planes. They move from islands throughout the Caribbean. And yet we cannot see every year, guys, every year, we have to be pumping money into Liat. It's just last week there they had the heads of government meeting down here in St. Kitts, and one prime minister said in another 10, 12 days, if they don't put money into Liat have to be grounded. I mean, come on, guys. And then yesterday, Liat had a delegation meet with our parliamentarians and our financial secretary. So here is it now. We're going to be pumping more money into Liat. For next year to here, we want more money again. Come on, guys. We need a general audit of all the years of Liat under the different management to find out what is the problem why Liat cannot hold up themselves. And why every year that government have to be pumping money into Liat. Look at it now. They're saying they want $16 million to give Liat again. And Liat saying cut staff. Now they're asking the pilots, they're asking the directors to take a cut. And then have the audacity to be telling Prime Minister Brown in Antigua to be telling the pilots, don't put up no fight because the two shareholders say they ain't standing for no nonsense. I mean, you're begging us a favor and you are ordering us around like an army? Come on, guys.
Okay.
Something is wrong here and something has to be done. It's a favor they're asking. I mean, 10% of your salary at this time is a big cut. And then demanding it, ordering it on you. Guys, I would like to hear your expression.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, thank you for holding. Good evening, you're on the air.
Good evening. Very interesting to listen to this Liat debate. We see some of the Caribbean people, we're not fair to our Caribbean people and our Caribbean brothers. Liat. How much taxes we pay to travel up to St. Kitts? Anybody ever sit down and think about the taxes what we pay just to travel on the same Liat ticket? Why these Caribbean governments don't ease upon some of the taxes what they're charging for people to travel? To go from here to St. Vincent was $1,000. When you look into the ticket, maybe about $500 US is tax. These are the problems, Mr. Weber. We must be honest to ourselves. When American Airlines flying to here, the government pay for the seats when there's no seats. And we know what's going on. Yes, Liat has ups and downs. But Liat is a Caribbean airline. Liat belongs to us. We're so easy we could jump down our own throat. We're willing to help. But we're quick and willing to help other people who ain't even a part of us. You so quick we run down to talk about Venezuela? When the government, the Caribbean government need to take all the taxes, as soon as a woman gets in from Barbados, she jump on a tax at the airport. It's almost $150 under that you're paying in taxes out to St. Kitts alone. Because the departure tax is 100 and something else. When you reach Antigua, there's another set of taxes. But yet we want to crucify our own Liat. You so quick we the call and discard Liat? But for the Americans and all the other airlines, we'll be very sympathetic. Why are we here like this in the Caribbean? That's the problem I have with us. We are very dishonest when it comes to our own. The taxes is what killing us. So by St. Lucia, it's cheaper to go to America. It's cheaper to go from here to America than to go to St. Lucia. But we want to crucify our Liat. When America come, and there's empty seats, the government prefer it. That is okay. But our Liat have been there for us for years. I mean, they got ups and downs. But we're quick and wild to crucify our own. You guys have a good night, yeah?
Caller, hello?
Hello.
I could ask you a question?
No problem, Mr.
On a different note.
Yeah.
It might end up being a light moment, but that's okay.
That's okay.
What's your name?
What's my name?
Yes.
My name is Curtis.
Curtis.
Curtis Cook is my last name.
Yeah, I almost think that you're a frequent caller to this program for years, right?
Yeah.
There's a fellow who promised us a trip for the World Cup. Was it you?
Trip to the World Cup where?
A trip in St. Kitts.
Yeah, that was me.
It was you?
Yeah.
So when are you going to...
Well, there's no more World Cup. We had a cricket match down here over the weekend.
No, yeah, but what I asked you was, not when they're having cricket again, or when last they had cricket. You promised us a trip.
To St. Kitts for the World Cup.
Right.
We didn't come.
Oh, you. You're a heavyweight, you know.
You forget you didn't come.
I got you. So there was I thinking that you didn't give me, and the problem was that we didn't come.
Because my good Mr. Weber.
Yes.
My good friend, his soul rest in peace. You know Blackman, Teddy Blackman.
Yes.
Okay. You remember when the string band from Nevis went to England?
Yes.
Well, I take my good friend towards the first test match in England.
Yeah, but how does that apply
I'm
to
just
me?
saying this to you. So if you had shown up and you see that you were serious, going to make it, I'm a man of my words, you would have been at the cricket. Simple. I'm just trying to show you. I promised Teddy I would take him to his first test match, and I did.
Okay.
Simple. So whenever I have cricket again in St. Kitts, are you interested? You're going to come across? What are you going to do? Let me know. Or if you happen to be in England, maybe if I'm in England in August or sometime, I will take you.
Oh, really?
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Anyway,
sir.
yeah, have a good evening.
You too, sir.
All right.
Webo, I am a supporter of Liat. I think Liat has been badly serviced. I think that some of the Caribbean countries have had a free ride, I think, including our own. Liat to me is almost like a Caribbean institution that has, like cricket, like university. I think we have to try and support it. It's unfair, in my opinion, Webo, that we benefit from Liat, because Liat brings people here and take people away from here, and we make no contribution. I heard a caller talking about we spend millions of dollars. We haven't spent any money on Liat. And as the caller rightly says, one of the real problems with Liat is that we tax every ticket that we buy for taking Liat. The government put a tax on it. And so it would seem as though that the ticket is very expensive, but much of it is government taxes. And when you realize that you have four governments, Dominica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Antigua, and Barbados, and they have to bear the brunt year after year of paying subsidies to keep Liat alive, and some of the other territories are benefiting from it, including Guyana and Trinidad, all those countries. I mean, it's unfair.
Okay, Ted, let me take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Weber, and the panelists. Ted know that I worked for Liat in 1971, and Liat been having problems then until now. But at the same time, the Caribbean government must bail out Liat, because now, when you come to the airline business, it's a losing battle. Look around for Eastern, look around for Pan Am, Premier, all those airlines, they go on under. But the idea is we talk about America, we talk about England and whatever. England is not going to let British Airways go under even though they're losing money. America is not going to let the airlines, American Airlines and, the other carriers here, they're going to do the best they can to bail them out, because just like St. Kitts and Nevis, you see, we might think, and people state, we are depending on tourism. America depends on tourism just as much as St. Kitts, Nevis, and the people from the Caribbean. Who you see when people come back here, they buy they have those shirts, I love New York and whatever it is, or wherever they're coming from. The people here who live here, they're not buying those shirts. It's the people who come here and spend the money, just like how the Americans who come down here buy their shirt, like, you know, I love Nevis. So we need the airlines. If Liat go on there, who's going to pick up which airline going to pick up the slack to take people around in the Caribbean? How people are going to get around? It's not going to happen. It will. I'm telling you, from 71, they had their ups and downs, and you know, everybody just got to step up, because they come into their countries and they help out in their countries by you know, taking the people here and there. So therefore, the government, where these places have landed, must help out the situation, and they just have to make sure these people, you know, are more efficient who are working with the yet. But I won't lose no sleep, because they must come up with their side. That's about it.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. That last sentence was going to be my contribution to the whole debate, because, as he said, this thing been going on from 1971. Don't lose any sleep, because next week, next year, and the next 5 years, you'll still be traveling on Liat. Now, however, it needs a serious debate about it, though, because there are ways, I think, that it can be better. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Good evening. You're on the air. Good evening. You're on the air. Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening again, Mr. Weber. A light moment. Do you think the Caribbean should bail out West Indies cricket team?
We're doing it all the time.
So it's the same thing. They can bowl over 45 and 71.
Boy,
so you tell me, are they any different to Liat?
Shameful, I tell you.
We come good sometimes and we come bad sometimes.
But Liat come good all the time.
Man,
what is the track record of taking us around the Caribbean?
Yeah, all right.
It's our airline.
That's what I'm saying. I'm a serious note, but I mean, come on, let us really think about it. You know, as the guy said, been years, but I'm saying the Caribbean, the taxes were killing us.
Yeah, that's why.
Ease up on some of those taxes, he might be able to help Liat a little bit, Mr. Weber, please.
Yes, that's why I said, you know, it calls for, you know, a serious debate, discussion, because, you know, as the caller says, it's been going on since 71, or maybe even before that. If you continue to do it, it will continue forever, correct? And so maybe you just have to discuss it, the pros and the cons and so on, and see if you can come up with something else, depending on what you're looking for. In terms of taxes, I find it's interesting that somebody made this point that there's a lot of taxes.
Yeah.
And perhaps implying that as a consequence of it, it's going to fail. So what happens is that you have a lot of businesses being operated. And when you add up the taxes that are put on these goods at the port and so on and so forth, sometimes you get nearly 100%. And a lot of these companies still making a lot of profit.
Well, I don't know what the...
Right, Edric?
Yeah. I don't know what the consequences of the taxes are, but I had a round-trip ticket in 1966, and I never used the other half. And I'm certain that there are people who would have bought round-trip tickets to go to other destinations and still didn't use it. But if it is low productivity, that could kill any business.
But that was one of the findings.
People have to step to the plate and increase their productivity, and if they've got the capacity, do it. Because ultimately, when that airline decides that it's going to lay off people, you who actually have not been producing or carrying your fair share of the load might find yourself out on the street looking for a job.
Well, let me ask you this. Isn't it a way of life that we practice, though, in terms of productivity and nonetheless our expectations?
It is sad, and seemingly it might be a chronic problem and maybe part of our culture where we just do not produce enough, but yet we want to reap the benefit.
But then Naya argued earlier that it is perhaps a system or type of, what was it, Naya? Like you would say, just like you have socialism and communism and capitalism and so on and so forth, maybe that is just us, our way of life. Maybe we can call it a new name or something, whereby we don't produce much, but we have to get the best.
Well, I'll tell you, the chickens usually come home to roost. And in this regard, if low productivity is at the crux of the problem, somewhere along the line, we have to step up to the plate. Somebody got to crack the whip and ultimately tell people, you have to produce to keep our regional airline going.
But can't we produce low, have low productivity, and still get the best?
Well, unfortunately, seemingly it is happening with LIAT, because if the findings are, or if one of the findings is that productivity is low, it means that the regional government has to step up to the plate to pump money in lieu of revenue generated by the flights or ticket sales, as the case might be. But the governments have to carry the weight of LIAT simply because it provides safety
and service.
And the service. And when you were to quantify the cost of a death, as the case might be, which we're not having it with LIAT, as compared to other airlines.
Yeah, but to be fair, we're not having it with other airlines either, at least if we're talking about our region.
Well, regionally.
So that's what we're speaking about. So, you know.
All right, let's keep it regionally. And I'm just saying the governments have to find the money. And when I said it last week, that the money is there based on priority.
Yeah, but the study that was done, which found the low productivity, they're carrying maybe only half the number of passengers they used to be carrying and so on and so forth. So the problems that they found. What I'm saying is, if we look at the big picture, might we find ourselves in a situation where across the board, whether it is with transportation, government services, as Ted had pointed out earlier, or whatever the area is, do we find ourselves having a way of life where we produce very little when much is required, but nonetheless find a good enough reason to still get the best there is?
It's a way of life. It's our culture.
So then what are we making noise for?
We must make noise.
Oh, okay. Well, that's part of it too.
We must make noise.
And that's part of it.
Because ultimately, the chickens come home to roost. Somebody has to pay the piper. And it simply means that governments, through taxes, have to pump money into the airline to keep it afloat. It comes right back from you. But there are some people who, in fact, getting the benefit, but not actually making the contribution that they're supposed to make commensurate with the benefits that they're getting.
Well, but we will get nowhere with that.
You have Caribbean Airlines in Trinidad, and they're losing money, and they still continue to show, because it's part of the prestige of the country. You have to have an airline. You have to have people to take people back and forth. You just can't drop it and expect some other airline is going to come and do the service.
Okay, well then, should it be then a decision be made that you make a decision in terms of putting it in a certain bracket, as you do with, let's say, health?
Yeah.
Or something like that, and say, well, when it comes to transportation, everybody travels almost for free.
I don't know that.
Well, no, when I didn't say free, I said almost for free, based on the relative costs that because that's what happens with healthcare, you know, in terms of the relative cost. So when it comes to healthcare, you almost get treated almost for free. Yeah. When it comes to traveling, you can travel almost for free, and so on. So once it becomes
essential service.
Yes. So,
but
what's about the quality of service?
If they just remove the taxes,
yeah,
that would solve the problem.
Taxes is a
because
lot to do with it.
Liat cannot be competitive in places. If they run a destination against some other bigger airline, they just can't cut it. And they're competing. If you're going into places like Puerto Rico, I mean, I don't even think they're going to Puerto Rico now. I'm not sure. But who is going to take Liat to go to Puerto Rico when you can take a bigger airline and get there faster, and you know you have more perks? It just doesn't make sense. They can't compete. They can't even give you a drink of water. You know, I mean, not that most airlines are giving you anything now. Anyway, but the point I was trying to make is bigger airlines sometimes have the buoyancy. You know, they can do other things. Liat can't even bring a quick pack. Sometimes I pay for a quick pack. And it should get me to you in 2 days and sometimes 5 days, and I'm struggling trying to find my
yeah, maybe
because they just don't have the capacity.
We're running out of time.
They can't move it.
Maybe Dr. Bartlett, that may solve the problem, but maybe not. I'll tell you why. Sometimes you have a worker and they don't do no work. Their productivity is low. So somebody is very smart, so they tell you what you have to do is increase their salary. So you increase their salary, same problem.
No, but it depends on how you measure productivity, because I hear it being bandied about. But the point is, if you can get something out of me in 2 hours, why you want to keep me on the job for 8 hours to produce the same thing? And that is what is happening around here. When you're talking about people, and it's just not just here, because I looked at a study, and I think I would have shared it before, where they say in England, people are working like 3.5 hours a day. The rest of it, they're doodling, they're on their computer and stuff like that, because the work that you have contracted them to do, they would have finished that in ample time. They don't need 8 hours to do it.
Right, but so all you have to do, right, if they only need 2 hours to do the work, you make a value of an hour, and you pay them for 2 hours. And then what they said, they ain't have enough money to buy something. you see what I'm saying? So that is why I said things like there's certain things that need a good debate, because sometimes people make a point, and if you don't have enough time to cross-examine it, yeah, that's the last word. This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Grantley tomorrow evening at 8 for On The Mark. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community, thought that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.